Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Creating a Professional Title Block for Revit. Our agenda for today is as follows. We're going to look at how we use a family template to create a Revit title block. How would we set the size for it? How can we set object styles? Use shared parameters. Why is information placement important? And we'll field any questions you might have. Moving on to the first item, the family template. They are located within the new Revit 2021 under the Family Templates English Title Blocks folder. You can see them on the right over there. And if you had to use an existing family, you will find them within your Autodesk library. Having a look at how we might start a sheet title block from scratch, we would use a family template. That is one option. You'll find them conveniently located within the title blocks folder in the family template library. There are existing sizes like the A0. This consists of a blank page with some lines, which is exactly the same size as the page. In this case, the size of an A0. Anything else that you place on here, you have to create from scratch. Typically, on the creation tools, we can create lines, put some other information in here, including labels and text. We'll have a look at those later, but similarly in our view tab, there's an interesting item within the family template, and that is the revision schedule. Looks like a normal schedule with information from the revision, the project information that can be added, sorting and grouping as normal, formatting, as well as the appearance. And one can then place that within the view. The formatting of this, you might get it to look the same as a normal schedule that you are used to. If you want to change this, you double click on it, open it. Remember to switch out onto the revision schedule so that you can edit the fields, sorting, grouping, formatting, and appearance to your requirements. So that would be starting from a defined page size family template. If you have a unique page size, or if you want to define your own page size, even though it is standard page, you can use the new size metric template. This also has the outline. Change the size of the page. Click on one of the lines and change the length. Define the outline as required. It's easier though to start off with an existing title block. A good one to start with is the Autodesk title block. You can load this in from your family library. In 2021, most of the families are within the English or the UK library. When we've loaded that into our project, we can create a new sheet that references the A0 metric title block. Again, you can see the outline. In this case, it's visible. And the rest of the information on here. When you click on the title block, the labels will be able to change. If you change the information on the label, then the information will also change on the parameter that it is defining, and vice versa. That is how labels work. There is also text, which can't be edited within the project, and the revision schedule that will show the revision number. Make this your own. Edit the family. I usually recommend is that you tab the outside line, find the size of the page, and change them to invisible lines. Invisible lines don't plot, but they are still visible within the editor, and their visibility is controlled with their visibility parameter. To see how this operates, note that if we switch on the visibility preview, that changing the lines to be invisible will hide them in the preview. That is how it will plot. The reason why we do this is because many printers won't be able to print the complete extents of the drawing should you have them visible, and they might scale. That is something that you would not necessarily like. The logo is just an image that has been imported into the project. I would recommend that you rather use a simply defined CAD logo. Usually they plot better. If it is to be an image, then you might have to use a higher resolution image, which takes memory, and they don't always plot as crisp and as clear as what one would like. This information over here is just a simple text family. It's information that is constant throughout all of the title blocks. That is the revision schedule. Again, if you'd like to edit it, double click to open, change out the family to the revision schedule, and see that you can manipulate the appearance. And the formatting. If you had to create this your own revision, another title block, you'd like it to look like this, and open the AutoCAD title block and have a look at how they've defined it. This is an example of a label. You'll see that you can create a label, and when you place the label and you edit the label, you see how the label refers to a property of the project itself. And when you insert the sheet, it will automatically update what the information is within the project. The rest of these elements are the lines that were drawn. If you wanted one of the lines to look different to what you've got available to yourself in here, note that the line styles don't come into play here, rather the object style. And this is where you would have to define your own new object style. However, it's cautioned against because the object styles are usually managed under protocol. So that is something that you would have to declare to your BIM manager before changing or adding your own object style. You would then save this file as your own family and load it into the project and overwrite and update the existing build. So that is how you might start from scratch, and using the Autodesk title block is a good idea. I would recommend that over and above starting from scratch. What we'd like to look at is a professional title block, something that we might typically encounter in the industry. Now, this is an example of such, and we'd like to see how we manage this. In this instance, we've got the revision schedule that is showing the latest revision. We have an image, a CAD logo, which is simple. Then we've got our status. In South Africa, this is done to British protocols. In South Africa, you might just find for information only, for construction. And how this title block behaves is that if I switched it out into the shared title block family, it will update the revision code. We'll see how we can do this using visibility. These labels are as per usual. It's just reading information, it's the project information. And then we get to the interesting bit. This is the information that we would like to have, including the drawing number, project number, sheet number, the suitability code, the revision scale. Who designed, authored, managed, and who's the team manager, and what are their respective registration numbers, and so on. Now, this information, for instance, the registration number of the designer, the SACA, typically in South Africa, that is not something that is available directly as you install Revit. It's not part of Revit. So this is information that we need to add to the title block. Please note, though, that it isn't a normal project parameter that you might be familiar with, where you just add a project parameter to the project category or subcategory. It is in fact a shared parameter. So how do we manage shared parameters within Titleblock? Well, let's open the Titleblock, edit. Once again, we can see the outside extents is set to invisible line. In this case, they are visible. Note the status are all superimposed. when we switch on the visibility preview, we can see that it isolates the current type that is selected from the family tab. If I have to change this out, note how the parameter that governs the copy of the text visibility is switched out. So from work in progress to shared, information is changed type. Each time the visibility parameter is moved on. And with regards to the drawing number, there's two more parameters. One for cloud naming, where we would not like the suitability code and revision to affect the naming at all, because we'd like to keep the name constant so we can keep a history of that file. And that's why we've got information and then also the LAN. So the one with the C denotes the cloud. That one is just the LAN. You see how it switches from LAN on, cloud. These visibility parameters are available from the properties, and you can see how they are mapped or grayed out because they are mapped with an equal sign onto the correct parameter. That is also true of the name, drawing number. Its visibility is mapped onto the correct visibility parameter. And that is how we manage the switching out between family types of the visibility of some of the components that we've got on our draw. The other thing to mention here, should we switch the visibility preview off, is that the outside parameter that we have there, the invisible line, which is visible, compared to the guidelines for placing my text, which are also invisible lines, but that are set to be invisible. Once I switch the visibility preview on, the invisible line set to invisible will disappear. So to recap, this is an inserted image which has been scaled correctly. These are just simple lines and add. It will take some doing to reproduce this item here as a image, as a CAD entity. Possible, but it will take some doing with AutoCAD creation tools. You can do some spline. You might be thinking, like I did, that inserting a CAD, AutoCAD or CAD template, exploding it, especially with a logo like this, would be simple. The unfortunate reality is that it's not, and that you would probably have to recreate this in Revit lines and hatched patterns or pulled regions before it will come out like you would like. So my recommendation, if you start your own drafting company, it's usually just easier to use a simple logo as opposed to a complex image, unless you are comfortable with using a high resolution import of an image, which takes up some of your memory. This again is just the revision schedule. You'll see you can drag it a bit longer or shorter if you like. And in this specific one, just been adjusted in the double click, switch out the family type. It's been adjusted to use smaller text and also to read from the bottom up. Then we still have our labels, so the same as before. The project address and project name defined. But let's have a look at this information over here. What is this? This is that new piece of information that we would like to manage. In the label itself, in this case, you'll see that it's the ARC number. Let's have a look at the designer and the designer's registration. That's what we've been talking about. When we edit the label, you'll see that it is referencing this parameter over there. Now, you'll notice that I'm in the process of renaming my shared parameters from something that's just caps onto something that's more like the interoperability tools classification definitions. This makes it easy for me. I'll explain the reason why I use my initials and my surname or any sort of code predicate the name. Not only does it sequence file within the list, but it also is not a safeguard, but it helps to keep the possibility of duplicates of parameters within the project to a minimum. I'm going to replace that with the design by label. You can still see the parameter with this design by parameter over here. When I do that and I edit the label again, because this is not a native parameter to the family, you'll see that it's now disappeared. So now we can simulate how we would bring a shared parameter in. We would select it from our shared parameter file from the correct group. It's the registration of design by. And we would insert that into the label and remove the native information, the wrong information, in that case giving us the name of the designer, not the registration number. And in the sample name, we put in angled brackets to indicate that this information must be entered, and maybe a sample length of what we want that to be. So it's pretty straightforward when you already have the shared parameter file. So let's just focus on the shared parameter file. You'll find it in the Manage tab. Points towards a specific file, in this case, on my BIM 360 hub. And that's also the same within my project. Here's the shared parameters, the same file. You can also create your own file if you want. But why would this be important? Because, and I'll demonstrate quickly, Here's our standards. And there is our shade parameter file. And notice how each shade parameter has its own global unique identifier. Now there can be multiple shade parameter files from which shade parameters are brought into the project. If, for instance, there is a parameter in a different shade parameter file with the same name, but with a different global unique identifier, then those parameters would coexist within the project and would create havoc with our scheduling. So the management of the shade parameter file is important. Now, I would recommend that somebody like the information manager or the BIM manager manages the shared parameter file and adds or modifies parameters as per request, or otherwise that the design team understands carefully that they should not create duplicate shared parameters within the project or the title. In the case of the file name, or the drawing number, not the file name, drawing number, it is a combination of information that is applicable to build up the node. There's no break in the parameters to put them onto separate lines. And in this case, the name is then built up using prefixes like the dash. To give us our file, our drawing number. A drawing is typically seen as a document which is printed and it must be readily identifiable. The sheet number is a placeholder that is also from the file name, but that's according to protocol. This is also an interesting label. This label is time and date stamp. And what the label does is every time that the sheet is modified, it updates so that when it is printed, the latest date appears. With that in mind, if there ever was query as to all the information is the same, which drawing is the latest printed version, then it can be identified by that label. Once we've done, we save the title block. We load it into the project, overwrite the existing version, and its parameter values. There are a few of them in the project, so it has to update all of them. Might take a small while. And that is then the first part of how we manage the shared parameters so that the title block can report the correct information. We also need to add the information as project parameters. Here you can see the classificatory parameters from the BIM interoperability tool and the naming convention, which makes them easy to identify. Similarly, with the first part of the name being possibly unique, easy to find one's own shared parameters. These are typically added as a shared parameter from the shared parameter files, relevant group, and then the parameter, and then attached to some categories, category or subcategories, or within an interface, looking at the ones that have already been created. The assumption in my template is that the project conforms to a work stage. So in this case, it is attached to the project information category under the data heading. What that means that I'll find the information in the project information under the data header. There is the work stage. The items like the designer's registration number has been added to the sheets. So each sheet has under the data header the registration number of the designer. Should I change that to 1, 2, 3, 4? The sheet will change. However, it won't be changed on the next sheet. Compare that to workspace 3. When I change the project information under the data workstage there, it changes both on this page as well as the previous page. You can also enter the information directly by clicking on the title block and then on the piece of information. Because Revit is a bidirectional associative program, or in database speak, it uses the concept of atonicity, it will also update project information. Same is true of the project address, project name, and the client, because they're all linked to project information. If you needed different clients, project names, project addresses, you would have to use either text, edited on each and every block, create multiple family types for them. And then with the information over here, where the name is built up from various information, you'll see how it conveniently attaches it as a table of information that can easily be filled in. And there you can see time and date stamp available. Lastly, notice that I've placed all of the information and metadata, the information, I've placed it onto one corner of the page. The reason why we do this, especially on large pages like A0, is so that when we bring it into a cloud environment, in this case BIM 360, when we publish our plans in PDF, we define title blocks. And what these title blocks mean, it's different from the title blocks that we are used to in Revit. It's not the Revit title block, it is rather a mask that is placed over information and which then uses object character recognition to populate metadata within the platform. However, when it is a very large area like an A0, the object character recognition will fail. So if you do have the opportunity, presence of mind, try to keep all the information in one corner of your title block. After this is done, page size is correct. Now it highlights that invisible line when you hover over it. Notes might be included as text. The type of the title block can be managed through the types. Visibility, parameters, make sure that the drawings are correctly populated. There's an example of a land-based file where we don't care if the name changes. It's cloud-based. The information is always the same, and the suitability code and the revisions kept constant. I hope you've enjoyed this short webinar on how to create a professional title block for Revit. As we've seen, if you want to have a simple title block using the Autodesk template for a start is a good idea. But using or compiling a professional title block takes management of shared parameters. As there are no questions, does anybody have a question? I don't think the question come through. I see some comments. No questions. Thanks, everyone. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And remember to keep safe in this time of COVID.